And perfect. I don't want to do it that way. I want to do it that way. Well, we are running a crazy test here on valleyhoopsinsider.com today. I'm trying to be live. I'm trying to talk to Carter Chapley about St. Louis University Billikens, trying to do it on YouTube, on the website, and write together with one another. So if we break the internet today, we apologize. Welcome to valleyhoopsinsider.com, part of the Valley Hoops Insider website. And our guest today is Carter Chapley. He is the Billiken beat writer for Danny Mac's. You could tell me the whole name for the website. Danny Mac Hoops, Scoops, something.
Scoopswithdannymac.com.
I knew I had it in there somewhere. And Carter is a longtime associated with St. Louis U, and we're going to talk about the Billikens. Of course, people know the Billikens are expected to do great things this year, Carter. And but before we talk about them, tell us about you. Give us a little bit of your background.
Okay, so I was born Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Wasn't really a big college hoops fan until later in life. Was a big Kansas Jayhawks fan for no particular reason. I think that they wore blue. But moved south, went to Graceland University in Lamoni, Iowa, which is a little town that if you blink, you miss it. Played college baseball there, and then was looking for a second career and grew up. And I found one at St. Louis University where I helped run the sports page at the U News. Quickly became entrenched with the St. Louis University basketball program. And now I'm here writing for scoopswithdannymac.com, doing contributing for bustingbrackets.com as well. And we're just trying to help cover SLU a little bit better, you know?
Yeah. I don't know if we're competitors, Busting Brackets. I write for midmajormadness.com and my own website. So we might be competitors. I'm going to have to sign off right now.
The way I see it is anybody who covers mid-major basketball, they're friends.
Absolutely.
I love the guy. I love everybody over at Mid-Major Madness. The fact that we can, since starting to cover SLU, I don't know, I think this is my third or fourth year covering it, whether part-time or full-time. I've come to love mid-major hoops in a way that it truly makes me kind of almost detest the Power Fives and this is the heart of college basketball in my opinion. So I can't imagine, if someone wants to pay me to cover them, I will absolutely do it, no question about it. But I find far more interest in the mid majors and small majors and whatever you want to call them these days. I know inside of SLU, they don't love the term mid major. They think they're a high major is I think what they call themselves. But I can't imagine covering anything else.
I'm with you, and I feel so strongly about that too that I kind of disdain those other programs. But because I've been so entrenched in my own thinking and my own look, and you're right, Northern Iowa, Loyola, St. Louis U, they don't. Hey, I'm not no mid-major. I mean, they disdain that, and yet because there's a hunger for that niche, they're going to get extra promotion from people like you and Busting Brackets and mid-major because they're saying, hey, we want to give these other guys some time. And so it actually works in their favor a little bit. Tomorrow, midmajormadness.com will announce that the Billikens are their number 2 ranked team of the mid-major poll. Today, they just published my 2 stories in Northern Iowa and Loyola. They're number 4, number 3. And the Billikens will be number 2 in the mid-major preseason poll. And behind Gonzaga, believe it or not. Gonzaga will be number 1 in the big poll and number 1 in the mid-major poll.
Yeah. It's such an interesting, it makes me think that the term mid-major is bad because it just doesn't truly accurately represent, a group of schools. Because I think there is such a difference between, I would say schools like you were saying, like Loyola Chicago, Gonzaga, Northern Iowa, SLU, Dayton in the A10. They aren't the same as, some lower end, smaller schools, but they're definitely not, smaller than or less competitive than any of the Power 5 schools. So just to put just because, I know Rutgers is going to have a great year, but for so long, schools like Rutgers, Nebraska, who haven't been extremely competitive just because they're in the Big Ten makes them Power 5. I don't think that's the qualifier. You can be in the Valley and in the A10 and be just as good.
And the A10's loaded. It was loaded last year. The A10, I think, is a league that has been good, dipped a bit, but I think it's a league that is going to be right there with those other, what I call, those Power 7 conferences, really the Power 5, the Big East and the AAC. I think the A10 is right there with those leagues as well, and or at least nipping at their heels. And so having SLU in St. Louis for me, you and I both live here. It's awesome, right? Good teams come through, get to see good quality basketball. The Billikens were great last year, had a really nice season. They've got everybody back, and they're getting a lot of pub around the nation. Is it overhyped, do you think, Carter Chapley, or is that exactly how people should be thinking about them?
I'm so hesitant to. I'm really hesitant to get overhyped on them because I don't want to be seen as the guy who's really hyped on the team I cover.
Sure.
I think they are extremely talented. It's funny because when I see them I see them generally in that 45 to 55 range of being nationally ranked. I think that's a little underrated. I think they have the full potential to come out of this holiday week being a top 25 program. I think they're that good. I'm curious as to see what changes. I think that they're going to have some constants. They are going to be a spectacular defensive team. That I am not even remotely concerned about. The way Travis Ford coaches, the personnel they have, they're going to be a premier defensive team in the country. I'm more interested in seeing how their offense translates. I think the way they've operated hasn't always been conducive to high volume scoring and consistent offensive outputs. I think if that can change, they can be one of the premier programs in the country. Absolutely.
Looking forward to watching them play. Of course, everybody knows about Jordan Goodwin and Hassan French and Javonte Perkins. They're 3 all-league kind of returning guys, and we should talk about them a lot. My first question about Goodwin, and we've been watching him a long time. He played across the river, and now he's here at SLU. And he's just dynamic. I mean, all the rebounds, all those assists, scoring 15 a game. But he played 35, 36 minutes a game a year ago. If they're going to be an upper echelon team, do they have to put him on a little bit of a pitch count? What do you think?
I'm not certain about that. I think they might have to put him on a pitch count only because of how much deeper they are this year. They have so many more guys down the bench this year who could be who can contribute. Guys like Fred Thatch, who are coming off of injuries, who didn't play at all last year, who can really help spell his minutes. I think if you were to ask Jordan, he'd tell you he wants to play all 40. So you let him play all 40. I think if they're as good as they hope to be this year, he won't have to. He won't have to play all 40. He'll play the key minutes, but he'll also get a lot of time off because there are guys who can step in and fill that role. Last year, they played a lot of tight games where they probably shouldn't have had to. That's part of growing pains of having a really young squad. But I think if they develop the way they're hoping to, it might just be a byproduct of they're winning more games late and they won't need him in those final, in those middle 6 minutes in the first half or the second half where he can kind of get some time off.
If you're just joining us on valleyhoopsinsider.com or at YouTube, that's Carter Chapley. He writes for Scoops with Danny Mack concerning the St. Louis University Billikens. And I'm Harry Schrader. We're glad to have you with us. Hassan French, Carter, is just at 6'6" or whatever he is. It just defies logic what he's able to do. He's so physically strong and can kind of manhandle some of those bigger players in the paint, and he just never quits working. And that's kind of the hallmark of both he and Jordan Goodwin.
Absolutely. I mean, Hassan has a career as an NFL tight end if basketball doesn't work for him. I mean, he's one of those guys that, if we're going to have a street fight, I want him on my side. He is a bruiser. He is incredibly strong, incredibly gifted in the paint at using his strength to improve the Billikens' opportunities, especially rebounding, especially defensively. And being only, I think he's officially listed at 6'7". He might be a little taller than that. I'm not sure. Every coach has their own way of shifting how actually tall or big a guy is. He is so versatile defensively that he doesn't have to play the post to be impactful on defense. He can get out there and guard the 3-point line sometimes. He can swap guys and play guys who are smaller than him or bigger than him. It's so vital to what they do on defense when you have a guy back there who can really anchor it and you don't have to worry about him.
Talk about Javonte Perkins. He came off the bench last year. I think started one game, and yet he gets all these all-conference accolades. Will Travis Ford have him in the starting lineup, or does he use him as instant offense?
So I think he will start this year. I think the reason he didn't start last year was a continuity that seemed to work for them. They seemed to have something going. I think he's going to start. I also think that people haven't even seen half of what he can do yet. I think he is, last summer, he didn't get to the program, I think, until late August. So he only really had a month with the team. He was still figuring out his graduation from his junior college. He didn't really have all that time to mesh. And the one thing I know that's been a big change for him is he has spent the entire summer with the SLU in the weight room, with the trainers in the development program, with Rob Hornett, who is one of the premier athletic trainers in the country, in my opinion, came from the Golden State Warriors during their run. So he's the guy who really knows. And when you see him now, he doesn't look anything like this. I called him the Slim Reaper last year, or that dude. He is bulked out. He is a bigger guy now. And he's a guy I could very easily see drafted in a year, just based on his offensive ability. And now with his size, he kind of fills it out.
It's amazing. Last year I'd be at games and early in the year, you hear, well, he's a pretty good player. He'd come off the bench and he could score anytime he wanted. I mean, the guy is an electric offensive player. The guy that I'm most curious about this year, other than Newcomers that I know very little about, is Hargrove. I think that he has a chance to be kind of an X factor type of player, a guy that can change the dynamic of the basketball game. Have I drank too much of the Kool-Aid there, Carter?
No, I don't think you have. I think he's a unique case study in the type of player that can really take this team over the edge. He is a versatile defender, an athletic wing. He's tall. He's kind of like Hassan French in a lot of ways, in that he's tall enough to guard forwards, but he's athletic enough to guard guards. He's also, incredibly dangerous in transition. He's one of the best dunkers in the country. I think people are going to come to realize. He might have some competition with the newcomer this year, though, in Markai Strickland. Let me tell you, I've seen some interesting things out of him. But Terrence, if he can add that one extra thing, I don't know what it is yet, but one more thing, whether it's a jump shot or more confidence on the ball on offense, or getting his hands in the lane more often. I think it's just one more thing. He can be a real difference maker, game in, game out.
And go ahead.
I don't know what it's going to be yet. I think it can be any one of those things. It can be none of those things. It just, if he adds one more thing, I think he can be a real difference maker. And then going forward, his upper tier is just, his ceiling is just so high. Like, he is so athletic. He has so much potential that this is a guy like Javonte could come into it late and be a real showstopper.
Travis Ford has done such a great job, I think, of getting local players. Hargrove is local. Goodwin is local. Yep. Perkins has local ties. And yet going across the ocean and getting other players as well. I mean, he's shown the ability to recruit what he needs. What makes him tick? I mean, I love listening to him talk. He's got like that competitive fire and all that, but what makes Travis Ford tick?
In terms of the day-to-day, or in terms of basketball? Because
I think basketball first, and then we can talk day-to-day. Sure.
I think basketball wise, I think he looks for a type of person before he looks for what type of player they are. I think being a Travis Ford player requires a lot of mental toughness, requires a lot of willingness to learn, requires a lot of willingness to show up and better yourself on your own time. Jordan Goodwin has helped keep that culture alive at SLU. Like, he is a vital part. Him and his roommate Hassan French have, when your leaders are doing that kind of thing, everyone does that kind of thing. Recruiting wise off the court, in his own world, he is one of a kind. I mean, he really is. Like, he sees the world in his own way. He does things in his own way. He's always working. I've never seen the guy not watching film, even in off time. So he's always doing something, and he can. We've got a little joke going, especially with people close to the program, that if you let a recruit get on SLU's campus, you rarely see him not sign before he leaves campus. Like, he is such a salesman in that way, that he believes in St. Louis being, that next Gonzaga. He truly believes that he can make, or I think at one point they said, like Butler or Marquette or Gonzaga, like, he believes that they can be the next great, smaller school to gain really large prominence. And so self-belief is what makes him tick. I think he truly believes that that's what he's got. And he is dire after a national championship. He truly bleeds for it.
Well, and the whole Team Blue thing, when I've seen local kids sign, immediately they're saying Team Blue, I'm going to be part of Team Blue. I mean, they have been sold, and that could have a negative connotation, but I think it's positive. Like as you mentioned, Travis, he believes. He's not, his head isn't in the clouds. He doesn't believe things that don't have a chance of being real, but he has such a strong belief system that we're going to get from here to there, and I think it's contagious. Getting from here to there, how do they get from? I don't know. Let's see. I have the number right here, 58 or whatever it is, free throw percentage. How do they get from here to there?
Well, it's funny. The free throw percentage thing is so funny because I think it's been talked to death that when Travis was at Kentucky, he was awesome. one of the nation's best free throw shooters. Yeah. He was one of the best in the world. So it's such a funny conundrum that he's in. It's so unique because it's two-pronged, because as a team, I don't think that 58% free throw shooting percentage is representative of what they do as a group. I think the issue that often arises is that two guys, and unfortunately they're your two key guys, are really not great from the line.
54% for Jordan, French 33% from the free throw line.
And I think if you were to look at their share of how many of the team's free throws they take, they make up, I think, well more than 60 or 70%. Like it's pretty massive. And so it was interesting when he was asked about it at the media day I think it was this past week, but time all blends together these days. He said that they wanted to focus on, they want to improve as a team. They've implemented some changes in the offseason. As Jordan said, they called it real consequences to missing free throws in practice. So that sounds a lot like conditioning to me.
Sounds like push-ups.
Yeah. But I think the thing that they want to do most is guys like Javonte Perkins is a 70+% free throw shooter. Fred Thatch is an excellent free throw shooter. Yuri Collins is an excellent free throw shooter. Terrence Hargrove, he didn't get to the line often, but he can shoot free throws. I think they want to focus on, let Jordan and Hassan improve because they're going to need to. And I think Jordan might surprise people this year. Hassan, I'm not so sure about because I haven't seen him as much. But I think they want to focus on getting those other guys to the line more often to balance that percentage. Don't rely on having to get Jordan Goodwin to the line every fifth play or Hassan getting hacked in the lane every other play. That's great. Take those fouls. But if you can get Javonte the ball more often or Fred Thatch the ball more often, Gibson Jimerson's just an outrageously good shooter, but he's not in the same situations where he's getting fouled as often. If you can get those guys to the line, you're going to change your percentages a little bit more. So are they going to be a 90% free throw shooting team this year? I wouldn't bet on it. I don't think they'll be, I don't think they'll be that good, but will they be worst in the country? I don't think that'll be the case either. I think they'll be somewhere healthily in the middle. Yeah,
it's so bizarre to think of being worst, and they're talented guys. Yeah, and they're talented guys. I mean, they're not just bad basketball players. So all the national polls have the Billikens and Richmond 1 and 2. No matter if it's the Billikens or it's Richmond, and wherever you look. How different of a season will it be in terms of home court non-advantage because there's no fans? What I mean is the Billikens are the team that's way out here in the West compared to the rest of the A10. And so when they travel, I think they're at a real competitive disadvantage. Now they're going to places where there won't be fans. I think that helps them a bit as well. Do you think it's the same thing?
Probably. I think at this point you have to gauge every game as kind of like a neutral court, even home games, right. Even when, this Saturday, you're going to have one of the best in the country. And I think they're ranked second in the SEC and LSU coming to Chaifetz Arena to play SLU. And I think you have to see that as a neutral court game. There's no band, there's no cheerleaders, there's no fans. There's the radio, there's Rammer and Earl doing the radio broadcast and whoever's doing TV, and then a handful of journalists. It's going to be a real neutral court situation. I think it might help them going out east in gyms like Dayton, especially. Dayton can be a really pressing, space to go into for anybody. Richmond as well, VCU, Rhode Island. any of these high-end A10 schools have great fan bases. I think it's going to help them out. It might also, it might play the other way. I know last year SLU went to Rhode Island and Richmond, and when they came back, they said they really fed off of that. They like being booed. They like going into someone else's building and taking the wind out of someone's sails. So when you get on a run late in the second half, and all of a sudden you start hearing the air go out of the building, it's like, well, now it's nothing. There's complete balance. So I think there might be some, it's beyond my ability, some interesting work to compare, how the home court advantage worked in the NBA bubbles versus in college basketball's neutral, empty courts. I think you're right. I think it overall, if I had to summarize, overall, it might be beneficial for them, not having to worry about going into a hostile environment every time they go to George Washington or to Davidson. But it might not be as impactful as we think.
It's going to be interesting to watch. In a number of schools, it's been 30, 40, I don't know how many different ones have had to push pause on their seasons at various points. We're waiting for Loyola to start to practice again, and Indiana State just pushed pause. And so that's endemic across the nation. What are you hearing from the SLU people about precautions, how they're going about their business?
Precautions, they're following everything they can. I think they had a real wake-up call as to what could happen, how easily things could shut down when the women's team had to shut down a couple weeks ago. They're just getting restarted, I think at the end of this week, hoping to play Missouri at the end of the week. So I think they had a wake-up call as to what could happen. I think it's interesting that they decided not to go to Nebraska for that event. I know Northern Iowa also left that event at some point. I think that maybe speaks to, they have a degree of safety they feel they have to reach. And if the event isn't guaranteeing that, then we don't want to take part. We're going to come home. We're going to put it into our own hands. And I mean, you do everything you can. I mean, at this point, it seems like it's almost you're right, with all those schools shutting down, and I think it's almost a when rather than an if, almost as to when you have to pause for a period of time. But if I know when they're in practice, when they're not directly on the court, they're wearing masks. When they're not, the coaches are always wearing masks. If you're even near SLU's campus, you have to fill out an app, signaling all of your potential symptoms, and then the app clears you to come on campus. And they're very diligent about making sure that anybody who comes, even remotely close to the program, hey, where's your app? So I think they're taking it as seriously as they possibly can, but there is just a degree of, you roll the dice. Like you make the odds as good as you can in your favor, and then let it go.
I talked to one mid-major coach last week, and they were supposed to play in an MTE, and they found out the organization wasn't following protocols as stringent as the local university was. So they said, hey, you got to change that or we're not coming. And so this MTE was not following some things, or not being, maybe they had a different set of protocols. Maybe it wasn't worse or better, but it was different. And this mid-major coach said, hey, we told them that you got to change or we're not coming. And so it's going to be interesting all year long. How is Rutgers doing it versus how is SLU doing it, and how much control does the A10 have, or the Valley office have over all those Valley schools? And then from state to state and community to community, it's going to be a bizarre entire season. And you're right. It almost feels like when, not if.
It stunned me that just this week, these MTEs were saying, okay, we can't have fans. Like it was like, you waited this long? Like, what are you nuts? Like, it seems like that's the obvious. Like, get a good TV deal, because you're not going to have people in the stadium. It's truly shocking. Like, I hope they're able to make this work. I mean, every week we're getting college football games, and at one point I thought it wasn't even possible to get that done.
Right.
So, I know one thing that, I had at least one other school tell me that they were really looking forward to their students aren't returning after Thanksgiving. They're going to, the majority of the student body is going to stay home until January.
Right.
And that was going to do wonders for the program, because it just eliminates a huge X factor of how many students are on campus, how many people are they interacting with, who do you have to contract trace for? Some of these guys are still going to classes with in classrooms, and now they don't have to worry about that. So that might change things towards the Christmas break, but come January when conference season starts, I'm curious to see what every conference does differently and seeing who succeeds on a higher level.
And going back to the when and not if, Loyola doesn't even have students on campus. And then last week, I think about half their team got it. It's just amazing. So we should get back to basketball a little bit. Tell me, the people that have paid attention to the Billikens the last year or so, they know the guys that have been around, but they have some very interesting newcomers. Talk to us about some of those.
So the biggest group of newcomers are going to come, two of them are international. One of them is a domestic freshman, and one of them is a walk-on, which I find extremely interesting. So I'm going to get to him last. The two international students, one is Andre Lorenzen. He's a Swedish wing. And I'm telling you, folks,
that sounds like something at a restaurant. That's a Swedish wing.
Right? Yeah, he is 6'9". Well, he's listed as a forward, but he's 6'9", and he shoots the ball just as well as Gibson Jimerson does almost. He is a truly lights out shooter, something to watch. Wow. And I think he might be someone who, very much like Terrence Hargrove last year, it might take him a while to get into the fold. He didn't show up until later in the summer. He's got a lot of things to learn about the American game, in a sense, the physicality, the defense. He's not coming from an American high school, so there's some things that are, a little different in how things are operated and ran. But he can be a real X factor down the line. Martin Lindsen he's a really interesting case because he is a graduate transfer, but he has 2 years to play. He got his degree early. He came from UNC Wilmington. He is a true classic center. He is, he's a guy who can really battle with the best of them. With Hassan French, he gives him a run for his money in the paint. And he doesn't go outside of that. He defends the paint. He's a great passer, but he doesn't shoot the ball a whole lot. He plays center. And they're going to have him for 2 years. And he's going to do a lot to help with the forward situation. Because last year they ran into a lot of trouble with Jimmy Bell Jr., who's a sophomore now, and Hassan French. They would basically have to take turns on the court because of foul trouble. There was only 2 bigs who could play. Now you have a third. So now you can play more interesting lineups where Hassan doesn't have to worry about the foul trouble, or Jimmy doesn't have to worry about the foul trouble so much. So they're going to be able to do more defensively. It's just adding another 5 fouls, I see it, as well as a really talented player. And he's from Dusseldorf, Germany. I'm trying to remember correctly. I believe he had also spent a year at Valparaiso before transferring to UNC Wilmington during a coaching change.
That actually rings a bell with me. I'll dig into that for you.
So I think it's Valparaiso, but I that might be where I know he's this is his 3rd school in 3 years, and he graduated with his undergraduate degree a year ago, so he can play for another 2. So it's a really unique way to get around the transfer rules to get guys for longer periods of time.
Sure.
Markai Strickland is the freshman. He's from Miami. He is, as once described to me, a player of the year type of guy. He does it all. He jumps out of the gym. He can shoot. He can play defense. He can handle the ball. He can slash. He is a lot of raw talent. The one thing that was told to me at one point, and I don't know how much this has changed because it seems like the opinion on him has really shifted from project to could potentially impact immediately. They were really worried about his motor, his being able to do it all by himself at all times in the game. They thought, when he needs to turn it on, he does, but that's not Travis Ford's style, as we've learned. I've seen it. He gets up faster than anybody. He dunks harder than anybody when at any opportunity. He could give Terrence Hargrove a real run for his money in terms of best dunker on the team. It's a real disappointment that we won't have the Billiken Madness dunk contest just to get the look of the two of them, because I don't think you're going to get a whole lot of opportunities to see them go head to head like that. So I'll talk about Philip Russell first. Philip Russell is a local kid. He went to Vashon High. And he had offers from a handful of other schools, but he opted to walk on at SLU instead. I, I I think that speaks to Travis's dominance of the St. Louis neighborhoods. I think guys want to play for him. Guys want to come and be part of the team blue. He's Yuri Collins' cousin, so that also speaks to kind of the family aspect of it. And he and Yuri are very similar players. Philip might be a better shooter, but they are very true point guards. They don't, Jordan Goodwin was at one point a point guard. Now he's more of a shooting guard. But this is a spell for Yuri more than anything. A guy who can come in and fill that role if Yuri gets in trouble and not skip a beat. I don't know if he's as good of a passer. I don't know if he's got the same vision. Yuri.
Who is?
Yeah, really. I mean, Yuri could be a guy who sets the school record this year, and that wouldn't even be crazy. The all-time record, that is almost. He got that close after last year. So he's a really interesting case. There's a chance, I'm told, that when the three seniors and Jordan, Hassan, and Javonte graduate, he might get one of those scholarships next year. They feel like he's that kind of a guy, and he can get that kind of he deserves that kind of respect. But really, we just don't know at this point. I know he's getting financial aid, but I don't know the exact specifics.
Well, listen, when you can get a guy from the V, you've got a good guy. You got a good player.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about Okoro. Is he eligible or not?
So I believe he is eligible in the COVID standard where, technically he wouldn't lose a year of eligibility. I believe he is sitting out due to an injury. He is rehabilitating. Now he's gone back and he's going back to his days in Oregon, which he transferred into this year. He hails from Normal, Illinois. So he called this coming home. He's been wearing a walking boot around. He's been rehabbing a foot. I know he was struck by a car on the Oregon campus last year. So there's some interesting injury stuff going on there. I'm not exactly sure about the specifics, but I believe the situation is he could be eligible to play. He is sitting out for injury purposes and he is rehabilitating. And while they might have had the opportunity to play him, I believe the plan is to have him sit for the year.
But when and if he recovers and all of that, if he recovers fully, he's a high-end guy, right?
Oh, I mean, he was a top 75 recruit at one point. Went to Oregon. Helped them get to it. I believe they went to the Sweet 16 the year he was really his freshman year, and he was really playing when NBA draft pick Bull got hurt late in the year. He is a special player. I mean, he's a special guy to be around. He's a true center. He's going to really help bridge the gap between Hassan French and Jimmy Bell. You're going to have good Billiken centers for a while now. But he's the type of guy who can, I call him a bridge prospect. Him, Markai, Terrence, Yuri, these are guys coming in at the end of the Jordan Goodwin, Hassan French era and will now carry over into the next era of Billiken basketball. And if you want to be the Butlers, the Marquettes, the Gonzagas, the Wichita States, the, teams who are Loyola Chicago's, teams that are consistently competitive at the high level, you need these guys to keep rotating your roster over, because that's what's kind of hurt the Billikens in the long run. You had these great eras of Charlie Spoonhauser and then Rick Majerus in the 20 teens. And then you have these huge periods of just not being overly competitive. But if you can keep these rotating I call them shifts of prospects coming in year after year, you're going to be, what's going to put you into the next tier of talented.
Yeah. So when I see Travis signing these various guys with these kind of credentials, I think, okay, it is starting to now layer. The classes are layered. The talent level is layered. And guys like Jordan Goodwin, who was highly touted coming out of high school, but he had to grow into his game and become this outstanding player that he is. And he's an overachiever at some level. And now you're bringing in guys that are just going to have to achieve, not overachieve, to continue to make the program, what we all hope it can be. I tell people all the time as a mid-major fan, right? If SLU is really good, if SIUE could get just, competitive and they play the Billikens Wednesday. And of course I'm a Valley guy. If all those things start coming forward, SEMO gets a little bit better. All of a sudden, St. Louis as a whole a lot more fun talking college hoops.
Absolutely. And there's so much talent coming. Like you look across the country at guys. I mean, guys like Jordan Nesbitt, who's a St. Louis guy, just 4-star, 5-star prospect, just recruited to Memphis, and he just missed out, going to SLU. And but just the fact that you're in those conversations. I mean, there's the old story back in the day, how close Jason Tatum was to being a Billiken, and how things can change like that. But I mean, if you can keep all that talent in Missouri, it's one of the best, if not the best, college basketball state in the country.
Yeah, it becomes very exciting, I think, for the fan anyway, for the young guy to stay home. Sometimes the young guy, man, I want to go somewhere else. Caleb Love, is at North Carolina, and good for him, but man, I want him to wear a Billiken jersey or a Tiger jersey, or one of those, somebody close.
Don't let Billikens fans hear that.
No, I can't. Never. I'm a big fan of those two teams playing one another. That's what I'm a fan of, is the Billikens and the Tigers playing someday, somehow.
I think we all are. I think we all look forward to when that could happen. And Chris May had some interesting things to say about that. I mean, he said it's the closest they've ever gotten to a formal answer. I think he was on Frank Cusimano's show, where he said, "You never know what could happen in the coming weeks." And that's the closest we've gotten. And he's right, but that's the closest we've gotten to them, actually. And I mean, the women's teams open up against each other next week, so we know there's the relationship. Just make it happen.
Well, and in this COVID era, I think teams are going to be looking for games all year long. I think it's all of a sudden, oh, we can't play so-and-so. Hey, who's available? And we might be able to, particularly when there's no fans involved. It's not like, well, we have to sell tickets. We have to make it all happen. We can just get our 30-person entourage to your city and play. And I think that could make it kind of weirdly fun, actually, this basketball season.
It always seemed to me like the most obvious MTE to happen this year would be to get Loyola, SLU, Mizzou, and Illinois in someone's building and just make it and have a border battle of sorts. But those things are just too good to be true, it seems.
I was talking to Porter Moser this summer about developing a SLU Loyola home and home every year. They play each other. They're trying to get it. They're trying to work out home and home with DePaul, and they had it scheduled. And I still don't know if they're going to play this year or not because of the recent shutdown at Loyola. But they're planning on that. And so, yeah, I think some of those things could develop. Okay, so I'm going to put you on the line before we let you go. The Billikens, they win the A10. Yes or no? They go how deep in the NCAA tournament?
I'm willing to say no, they don't win the A10. If I was a betting man, I'd say no, they don't. It'd be great if they did. The thing I'm worried about for SLU is that they have maybe the highest ceiling in the conference. I think Richmond is incredibly talented. Dayton is incredibly talented. St. Bonaventure is incredibly talented. People aren't talking about how good Rhode Island is going to be with all even though they have such a new group. So SLU very could well win it. I do think that SLU has the biggest difference between their ceiling and their floor, if that makes sense. I could very well see, we don't know what Gibson Jimerson's going to be coming back. I think he's going to be a great shooter, but we don't know for sure. We don't know what Fred Thatch is going to be coming back. We don't know if their offense is going to be more consistent. Now, the thing about SLU is the way they play games, especially on defense, is they're never out of a game, but they are going to lose a game they should win because their offense doesn't click. If that gets solved, look out. They are a tough team to beat. Now, I'm willing to say that I don't think there's going to be a conference tournament per se. I think they're probably just going to go with the winner of the regular season gets the bid. And I think it's going to happen across, all the conferences, but that's just a guess.
Don't say that. We love Arch Madness.
I do love it. I got to go to my first one, but I'm being cautiously pessimistic, if that makes sense.
Sure.
I'd love to go to Brooklyn. I'd love to have Arch Madness, but I don't want to get my hopes too high. So I think it's possible that, through the slog of a season, SLU goes 14-4 and Richmond goes 14-4, but they had a better head-to-head or something like that. I think there are too many situations where that happens. I do think SLU makes the NCAA tournament, and I think they make it to the second weekend. I think they surprise some people. So I know that seems like very counterintuitive as to what they could do. I think getting to the NCAA tournament 2 years ago for SLU and losing to Virginia Tech was so important to this program, to Jordan Goodwin, to Hassan French, to Fred Thatch, the three guys who were there for that, to Demarius Jacobs, he played in that game too. And we haven't talked about him at all. And he's just another guy that shows how deep this team is. And the guy who started almost every game last year. Getting to that tournament, and the one thing I noticed when I got there to my first NCAA tournament in San Jose, the lights are literally brighter.
Yes, they are.
They're literally brighter. And like, I couldn't believe it. So just having that experience is going to be beneficial for them to playing in the NCAA tournament and getting through to it. Now, could they be the Cinderella that goes all the way, like we saw, my guy Fred Van Fleet's team do, and Loyola Chicago do all those couple years ago? Maybe. I'd love to see it. I'd love to go do it. But if I had to be an objective observer, I would say that's probably where my expectations lie.
But a win or two in the NCAA tournament would be awesome for this program as that next place, that next great place of plateau and getting there. It should be just a dynamic, fun season for the Billiken fans. They can listen and watch from a long way away, and we hope there's a lot of great games for them to be able to watch.
And who knows what changes between now and March and April? I mean, who knows?
Right.
Like, hopefully only good things.
If we take the vaccine and I've got a third eye or a third ear or something, but I'll be at the game. Don't worry.
Yes, exactly.
Tell people where. Yeah, that's right. Tell people where they can read. Tell us about your website and all that. I know you're writing for Dan McLaughlin, but tell us also about your website.
So all the Billiken stuff will be at scoopswithdannymac.com this year. I know that's very exciting. I did a lot of work for them last year. It's going to be different work this year, but just the same excellent. I love that relationship. I love working for Dan. He lets me cover the team however I want, and that's awesome freedom to just be able to talk about the best inside stories for SLU. I have my own website, carterchapleymedia.com. I do a lot of other, sports stuff. I talk a lot of Cardinals on the podcast, talk a lot of Blues, MLS, big soccer fan too. I mean, I talk a lot it all. And then you can always find me on Twitter at Chapley Media, and I'm talking a whole bunch of garbage there at all the time. But you can always find good, as every year as Billiken time gets around, it focuses in on the Billikens, and then in the off season, it just becomes for me the Toronto Blue Jays, Maple Leafs, and Raptors. So
there you go.
So that's how I shift my seasons. But with Billikens coming around now, it's going to be real focused and real professional.
That's Carter Chapley. I'm Harry Schrader. You've been watching Voices of the Valley, a portion of the ValleyHoopsInsider.com podcast and website. Billikens launch Wednesday at 6 p.m. I think that game's on one of the ESPN platforms. And they take on Southern Illinois Edwardsville from just across the river. And, man, I'm looking forward to progress for that Cougars team. They have brought in a lot of extra talent this year as compared to what we've seen over the last couple of years. So it should be a good first game for both of them. And then the Billiken Classic throughout the weekend, as Carter was mentioning, the Billikens get LSU later on in the weekend. So it's a good first couple of days, Carter, really, for the Billikens to test themselves out.
They could easily come out if they get a win against LSU and they beat SIU, which, I mean, that's the one I'm expecting to be a win, unfortunately, for the Cougars. But if they can get a win out of LSU, I could very easily seeing them in the AP top 25.
That'll do it for us, Carter. Thanks. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I love coming on.
Folks, remember, since you've been there, make it a better place. We'll talk to you again real soon. You've been watching Voices of the Valley right here on ValleyHoopsInsider.com.